natural kinship with animals, to openly delight in their multitude and ways, to talk with them, as St. Francis did and as every other child knows to do, making no distinctions between earthworms, snakes, spiders, turtles, or pigs as potential friends. It wasn't until after I was pulled up out of the dirt by my paternal grandmother, clearly baffled and disgusted by my appreciation for all things that crawl upon the earth, that I realized many adults felt there was a critical distinction between humans and animals, as well as among them. Some animals, as you aptly pointed out, like kittens and bunnies, she and other adults were able to sanction as potentially worthy companions because they were cute and they were fluffy. They were predictable in their docility. All sorts of human emotions and thought processes could be safely projected onto them. With the exception of that rabbit in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Rabbits are generally portrayed as very friendly, delivering eggs at Easter, amenable to being dressed up and played with. They seem to like it, or at least not be bothered by it too much. But other animals, some animals, I soon enough learned, were not worthy playmates. They were not considered cute. They were branded ugly, in some cases not even worthy of being called animals. They were called beasts, less than animals, defined by and reviled for their tendency to be unpredictable or dangerous. Beasts were to be feared and locked away. Unless, of course, you had what it takes to win the affections of a beauty and end up in an animated Broadway musical called Beauty and the Beast. The whole idea of what is beautiful or ugly, what makes one creature or species worthy or unworthy, what's involved in being human? What does it mean to be a human animal? Does being an animal have to do with our physical or mental abilities, or does it have something to do with our soul or lack thereof? What does it mean to live with the fact that horrific things are possible, dangerous, painful things do happen all the time? These are some of the things that have fascinated me ever since. The image of St. Francis of Assisi, who saw all of creation, the upright, two-legged, that's us, the four-legged, crawling, hooved, finned, scaled, and winged, as blessed and unified expressions of divine wisdom and love. Well, his image is found in many a front garden, even among those who are not Catholic. And I have to think his example resonates across religious divides among those who feel similarly that we're not all that different. Those who feel a natural kinship with and find themselves drawn to the animal world in deep curiosity and appreciation, recognizing their own animal nature. Speaking for myself, I'm very often drawn to animals also with a bit of wistfulness because of what I think we humans may have lost along the way in the process of evolution. In terms of the capacity for unconditional love, for example, an unbridled joy, the ability to be fully present and not racked with shame or guilt or self-doubt or self-aggrandizement. So typical of humans. Now, if I describe a human being as a kitty cat, what am I really saying? What am I saying about them? That they're docile, right? That they're sweet, that they're cute, they're friendly, manageable, domestic. But if I describe someone as a shark, or a vulture, or a wolf in sheep's clothing, what am I saying? That they're dangerous, that they're unpredictable and vicious and bloodthirsty. This illustrates the point that as much as we may seek to distinguish ourselves from animals, draw a clear line between them and us, we also relate to them. On some level, we do recognize ourselves in them, the good and the bad, and them in us as well. Rightly or wrongly, we attribute human characteristics to animals and animal characteristics to humans. The thing is, there are undeniable connections. So let's take a look for a moment at this month's theme of evil. Marla just shared her very thoughtful reflections. Thank you, Marla, for doing that. We also talked last week, particularly about the idea of inherited evil. My hope in focusing on that was to draw attention away from that snake, who, the story goes, tempted Eve in the Garden of Eden and has given snakes a bad name ever since, and to bring emphasis to what that story can tell us, not only about free will, the human ability to make conscious choices, but also about how differently human beings can react to temptation and to being caught in the act. What then? One thing I thought of is how differently human beings can react when their poor choices come to light. Right? Eve confessed, Adam stubbornly put the blame on her. Second, I thought about how we all end up paying the price together. No matter who really did what, we all end up paying the price together. We all end up outside the gates of paradise having to work out the details of survival together. So last week was about the burden of evil and the price paid for it. Today I want to explore some ideas about what evil may be. And of course, there are lots of different ideas about that. Entire theologies, religions are built around notions of what evil is, where it comes from, and how to conquer it. Is it man-made? Is it divine? Is it a matter of something being off-kilter with the soul? Or does it have more mundane physiological origins? Many wars have been fought and continue to be fought on behalf of such ideas. The common denominator, which is what I'm always looking for, seems to have something to do with a general agreement that evil is bad. A general agreement that it is tricky, that it is a master of disguises, that it is seldom recognizable, but we know it by the suffering left in its wake. We know it by its intention to cause suffering, and we know it because it leaves us feeling tainted, because it leaves us feeling that we are in need of a cleansing far beyond soap and water. Evil, we can agree upon, is not a worthy companion. So if conscious intent to cause suffering is in fact the baseline, if that's what upgrades a horrific event to an evil one, then animals, or most of them I would say, are off the hook, right? However much some of them really are capable of violence that looks to the human eye brutal and causes suffering, most often, as far as we can tell, well, that's just a vulture being a vulture. That's just a shark being a shark. Nothing personal. But human beings, oh no, that's a whole different story. It gets personal with human beings. Under certain circumstances, good people clearly are capable not only of evil thoughts, but of evil actions. And we have long been baffled by that capability, fascinated by it actually, and not just during the Halloween season. It's only in the last century or so, through the study of human physiology, that we're starting to uncover what really goes into our making the choices that we do. We tend to talk about the human brain as the organ that most separates us from animals. We're so proud of this up here. We can imagine that we were animals at some time, way back when in our evolutionary history, And that there was a moment in time when a little switch got flipped, and we became human, leaving all things animal behind. But that's not really the case. The part of the brain that we claim as most human is the neocortex, the part in front, the part that enables human language and abstract thought, imagination, consciousness, conscious choice. The ability to say no, for example, to that piece of cake, even if we really want it, that comes from here. The ability to not say aloud that incredibly judgmental, short-tempered, insulting thing that we know is going to be hurtful. The ability to say no to that comes from here. As does the ability to consciously choose to hurt, to consciously choose to manipulate or deceive, choose to do something bad or forbidden. It comes from here. And then there's the ability, the very human ability and desire to reflect on our actions, to feel remorse, to apologize, to make amends. When we learn that our actions have caused another to suffer, whether emotionally, physically, or spiritually, whether we intended that or not. Those abilities, more than anything else, even our remarkable opposable thumbs, may well define us as human beings. But there is more to us. There is more to us than what's going on in the front here. Because our brain actually has 3 parts at least. The part that we share with other mammals, with our little furry friends that keep us company at home, is the limbic part of the brain. The seat of emotions, the unconscious value judgments. Mammals have that capability. You see the love in your puppy's eyes, don't you? You see the love, and when you're eating at the dinner table and they're looking up at you with those big eyes, they're feeling something. You can tell. And cats have a way of letting you know when they're miffed, when they're just so not wanting anything to do with you. They have a way of letting you know. So then there's the oldest part of the 3 evolutionary stages, the reptilian brain in the back. The cerebellum and brainstem regulating the most basic physical functions focused on survival. The fight or flight impulses and instincts that keep animals safe. The hunger that keeps them eating and energized, and the unconscious sexual responses assuring regeneration. They come from back here. The thing is, humans are not one thing, and the human brain is not one thing. It has at least 3 parts representing stages of evolution. And here's the thing, they're all active all the time. Which accounts for how very confusing it is, how very hard it is for us humans to consistently do what our conscious mind, our most recently evolving brain cells tell us is right and good. This old part gets triggered far more often than we'd like to admit. And this new part can be really slow to the draw. And that's the human dilemma in a nutshell, and the cause of a lot of suffering in this world. How we function in this world, what decisions we make, how well we thrive individually and collectively depends to a very large degree upon how well those 3 parts work together, when and where and how we give ourselves over to primal animal instincts, when and where and how we override them, choosing reason and conscious thought, choosing restraint or compassion. Human identity and consciousness and human civilization arose and evolved at the same time as the neocortex. That's pretty clear at this point. Our ability to notice, to be conscious of the fact that there are powerful forces, whether within us or outside of us, to which we are subject and to which we just might be contributing, was a new development, a uniquely human development. Not only the ability to be conscious of the horrific, of the suffering, but to be horrified by it. That's a human response. to notice the impact of our actions and inactions, to feel empathy, to feel compassion, and a sense of duty. A sense of duty to limit suffering, to ease pain, to prevent it, to help each other balance out all of these internal conflicts and make better choices. Human civilization relies upon compassion and a shared sense of duty to work together with all of our differences outside the gates of paradise. For what purpose? I have to think to ease suffering and to make life worth living, not just to feed or defend our own primal instincts. So what does all of this have to do with St. Francis and the animals? Well, for the last few weeks, I have found myself seeking the company of my furry roommates, not just George, but also Maisie and Julie and Joe. Our cats and dogs, I'm spending a lot more time with them these days than usual. Anybody else feel drawn to that kind of company? I mean, you're welcome to borrow my cats and dogs, not the husband so much, but I can spend hours with them, looking deeply into their little eyes, envying them, their consistently calm and joyful demeanor, because they're not losing any sleep on behalf of what's going on these days. And I've wanted to say to them on more than one occasion, oh, you little fluff balls, you don't know how good you have it because it's a zoo out there. But that would be doing an injustice to animals. Because animals, generally speaking, conform to the standards of their species. Animals conform to the standards of their species. And what I'm seeing out there among some of my fellow humans is the opposite of that. What I'm seeing and struggling with is a very new, a very public grappling with that part of the human experience that we generally don't talk about. The part that civilized social conventions have been seeking to control for millennia, namely this part, the reptilian part of the brain. As a woman, I have relied upon social conventions to help me feel safe and to find my place in this world. I have relied upon accepted standards of civility. I have relied upon the idea that while human members of our society, myself included, may well still wrestle privately with our primal urges. I have relied upon the idea that there is a shared understanding that the goal for the sake of social cohesion has to be to not be beastly. To not give in to primal urges, at least not at someone else's expense, and certainly not to boast of them. The goal has to be better than that, if we are to call ourselves evolved human beings. I have privately wrestled with, but also hidden behind and benefited from those norms, those standards of public behavior. Similarly, I have relied upon the belief that leaders of our society will, as a matter of course, be guided not only by self-restraint and critical thought, which comes from here, but also by compassion and empathy. Those have long been standards, hallmarks of civilized people and nations, deemed essential to help people feel unified and safe and empowered, feel their most basic needs are tended and their rights are defended. And I have been horrified these last weeks and so very disheartened to be confronted over and over again each day lately, often several times a day, with some new evidence of social norms transgressed. Evidence of, apparently, how far we as a species have yet to evolve. I'm saying we as a species, not singling anyone out. At the same time, as horrific as all of this has been feeling, I find myself wondering sometimes if there might not be something redeeming in all of this embarrassing public display and controversy, all of this expressed pain. Perhaps it is, in some strange way, a step in the right direction. To name the fact that we do still struggle so very much with our primal urges. Maybe it's a good thing, in evolutionary terms, that we're becoming aware of how much conflict can and does lie behind a seemingly polished and evolved public demeanor. Maybe it's more honest just to name the lingering racism and sexism and greed, just put it on the table. Maybe by openly talking about all of this, by not denying it, by dealing openly with the stories, the triggers, the pain, the controversy, we're being exposed to truths that have to be grappled with if we are to create and uphold more meaningful, more just social norms. Those even more likely to help us prevent and ease suffering and make life worth living for all of us. I keep returning to that last image that we had of St. Francis speaking to the animals, wondering if maybe that can be seen as an invitation not only to acknowledge the animals out there, but also our own animal nature. I don't have the answer to this, but I keep thinking about these two sayings. First, practice what you preach. And second, it's always darkest before dawn. Last week I talked about how important it is to try to understand that evil is not that easily recognized or compartmentalized, that it can't be attributed to any one person or group, that we can't dismiss it or push it away because we're all outside the gates together and we all need to figure out this life thing together. That is not easy. That is not easy. Maybe a handful of saints were able to do that, but for most of us, for me certainly, it is not easy. And yet, no alternative I can think of lines up better with our values than to keep trying. In terms of that second saying, it's always darkest before dawn, well, I'm investing a whole lot of hope in this. In reminding myself that what seems totally chaotic and hopeless can and often does give rise to something better. And here's the key. If we don't let ourselves get sucked into despair, into me versus you, us versus them, if we don't let ourselves lose sight of the fact that the human animal is just that, an animal, and that the great challenge is twofold. Not to deny our animal nature, to be in conversation with it, and to keep developing our human potential for imagination, compassion, restraint, remorse, forgiveness, hope, and for doing our best to choose good over evil. So may it be.